So stress can have a significant impact on your client's health and their progress. And I'm not just talking about from a cortisol water retention standpoint where it might be masking fat loss. I'm more talking about their reaction to stress and the way they cope with stress and emotions that tend to be one of the biggest obstacles that your clients might face, and could be a significant thing that's holding them back from achieving their goals. Especially you might see this in a client who, they now things like their meal prep and their movement, they go into the gym pretty regularly and they eat pretty well. Let's say most days of the week, but when stress hits, whether it be work related stress or kids or home life, they just have some pretty poor coping strategies. They lean into things like chocolate and alcohol, or just they overindulge. And that just has a significant impact, not just on their physical health and their progress, but also their well-being. So it really is worth, as a coach, learning how to understand what is leading to your clients making these choices and helping them come up with some better ways to cope with stress, because stress essentially is not really going to go anywhere. We can look at well-being practices, and we will do at some point in this video. Stress is going to be there in some form, basically for the rest of our lives. So it's worth teaching our clients how they can try and adopt some better, more helpful and adaptive coping strategies without relying on things like food and alcohol. And the reason I believe this is so important for coaches to understand is because yes, nutrition itself is quite simple, but working with humans is quite complex. It's not just as easy as telling someone what to do. They know what to do, they've got a really important goal, and then they follow through and do it, right? With humans, they have multiple inputs and outputs, or influences and impacts. So I like to look at the deep or the total health model. I'm starting to create this thing a bit more like a synergistic health model, where it's how health is so much more than the physical side of things. It's physical, social, emotional, mental, existential, economic, environmental. All these things influence other parts of their health, but also they influence what someone does. It influences what they eat, why they eat, how much they eat, how often they eat. Like, it influences so many of their choices, right? But it also works bidirectionally, how their behaviors can impact those areas of their life. And this isn't a lesson on synergistic health. This is a lesson on stress and how mental and emotional health can influence your clients' behaviors, and how we can help them just try and find more adaptive and helpful ways to cope when they're triggered by certain things in their life. But the first part is understanding that, okay, and being curious as to going like, why did my client do this? So they're not overindulging in chocolate and alcohol because they're lazy or they just want to have fun. You get to the root cause of the problem, and it's stress, and then you can try and find a more suitable solution by some of the things we're going to talk about in this video today. So in the video, we're going to cover a couple of models and frameworks. The first one will be the habit loop. We're going to touch on my favorite thing ever, self-determination theory, and how we can use the 3 psychological needs that humans have to create better well-being and stress management practices. And then we're going to look at a effort and cost matrix of how to put these things through. But also we're going to touch on the choice point, which is from acceptance and commitment therapy. Now, the first one we have is the habit loop, right? So the habit loop is a cue, routine, and reward. And it's basically how, all behaviors, they're triggered by a cue. So something happens. This could be emotion-based. It could be a person that you're with. It could be a location and time of day, or a preceding event, okay? It can be a number of things. It triggers this kind of craving or thing in the brain that says like, okay, do this thing, do the next part, which is the routine. And then they've done that and they get a reward for it. So when it comes to stress eating, the cue is stress for this person, right? And it might not just be that they experience some stress. It could be that they get to a certain point on a stress scale. Let's say it's 8 out of 10 on the stress scale. Now, when they get to that point, they typically have a routine. They might lean into chocolate, they might lean into alcohol, and they get a reward, a short-term reward of that stress relief, that emotional relief. They do feel a little bit better for a short amount of time, even though we know from experience with them that tends to not last very long, and they tend to feel worse afterwards. But it is important to know that it is helpful for them at some point for a short period of time. They get that reward, and that locks the habit loop in. The unfortunate thing is that the brain doesn't remember the consequences. It remembers that short-term feel-good thing. So the next time that they get to that point where they're an 8 out of 10 on the stress scale, and they go back into leaning to the chocolate and the alcohol, because the brain remembers how good it felt last time. So it's important to empathize that they are doing it for a reason, but then it's about helping them highlight and understand, what it's costing them, how it's holding them back, and they might get a bit of a short-term relief, but then there is a long-term grief associated with it. So it's important that we help our clients do this, help them understand it, help them realize it. We're not telling them, hey, this is how it's holding you back. We want them to understand, okay, yes, it is helping me for a short term, but it is costing me long term. And this is the first part of the first activity we're going to go through, which is called the choice point. And this is from acceptance and commitment therapy. So your client's got to this challenging situation, right? They can go one of two ways, and they're going this way at the moment. They're moving away from their goals. They're leaning into things again like the alcohol and the chocolate. They're the two examples I'm going to use in this video throughout. They'll likely have some other options, but let's just say it's chocolate and alcohol. So the way that we go through this is we go, okay, what is the short-term relief that you're getting? And it's funny that we're trying to break this behavior, but we're actually asking them what benefit they get from it. Because again, there is a benefit from it, otherwise they wouldn't do it. So we ask them, what benefit do you get from it? They might list, they get this short-term relief, they feel a bit better for a little while, and then I go, well, how long does it last? It may not last very long. It could be like an hour, it could be half an hour. I've had clients before say like the moment that they feel good or that stress relief lasts for like less than 5 minutes. And then I ask them, well, then how do you feel after that? How do you feel after that 5 minutes or 30 minutes when that has worn off? And typically they feel worse. They go, well, now I feel guilty, now I feel ashamed, now I feel frustrated on top of the stress that I was already experiencing, and the stress actually hasn't gone away. But when we're looking at the choice point, right, so we've asked them, what is the short-term benefit you get from it? How long does it last? How do you feel after that? And then we go through, well, what are the long-term consequences of following this behavior, of continuing to do this every time you get stressed, or if it is your only way of coping with stress? And that can be linked to their health, it can be linked to their goals, okay? So we've got short-term benefit, and there's like intermediate consequence. So not long after they've done it, they tend to feel like rubbish, guilty, ashamed, and still stressed. But then the long term, it's holding them back from their goals. It's going to lead to them making this habit a lot harder to break, because the more they do it, the harder it is to break. And then it can have some significant impacts on their physical health, but also their mental health if they keep doing this over and over again. Now, since we've helped the client realize that this is not a suitable solution for their problems, we want to try and flip over to the other side of the choice point, where we're going to try and help them find an option that is going to help them move towards their goals. And this kind of ties also back into the habit loop of cue, routine, reward. So the cue is going to remain somewhat the same. They're still going to experience some stress. We're just trying to help them find a replacement routine, okay? A better way of coping with stress that helps them get the same reward, okay? So the cue and the reward stay the same. Still experiencing stress, they still want some stress relief, okay? We're just trying to find a better way of coping it so they get the short-term relief, the long-term benefits as well. So it's not a short-term relief and long-term grief. They're finding a way that helps them both in the short-term and the long-term. And this would be called a towards move, or an action that helps them move towards their goals. Now, where I see so many coaches go wrong with this, they tell their clients what to do instead when they're stressed. Why don't you just go for a walk? Why don't you just read a book? Why don't you just call a friend? And they're not bad ideas. They are helpful strategies. But they're not self-determined. They're not coming from the client. And that means if they're not coming from the client, they're less inclined to do it when they get to that really stressful moment. Because what if they're at work and they can't go for a walk? Or what if it's pissing down rain outside? What if they hate reading, And what if in that moment they just don't really want to talk to anyone? They don't really want to call a friend, okay? So we want to make sure that these ideas are coming from within the client. Otherwise, if they're not, then they're going to be more likely to go, can't do that, I don't want to do that, I'm just going to go and smash some beers and smash some chocolate. We want to give them a list of options that are self-determined, that are coming from within, okay? So this is where we lean into my favorite thing ever, self-determination theory. And it's the 3 psychological needs that we have as humans, which is competence, autonomy, and relatedness. To simplify this, I just call it competence, choice, and connection. Now, essentially what we're doing, we're asking our clients to list activities or experiences that fit under each of those 3 psychological needs. So things that help them feel competent, so basically things they're good at, or things where they can see that they are improving or getting better at. The next one is choice, so things that where they feel like they have choice, they have a bit of control. And the third one is connection, so things where people feel connected to others. I think the reason this works so well is because often a lot of the stress or emotional problems that people are experiencing, if you look at the root cause of it or try to label it even more accurately, they might feel incompetent. They might feel like they have no control or no say in things. And they may just feel isolated. They may feel alone. They may not feel connected to others, all right? So we can then go, all right, cool. If that's how you're feeling, let's try and use this strategy to help you feel competent, to help you feel like you're in control, to help you feel connected to others, right? And it's worth having, 2 to 3 options under each, okay? so they have options to use in different situations as well. And it might still be like, to feel competent, they might read a book or do some writing, or go for a walk, go to the gym, go for a run. Choice could be like just listening to your favorite music, or asking your partner like, hey, can I choose what show we watch tonight? And connection could be calling a friend or catching up with a friend for a coffee, reading a book with your kids, right? That could be another option where you're feeling quite competent as a parent, and then also like connected with your children too. So kind of a double whammy. Now they don't have to fit all three psychological needs. That would be like a super motivator or a super strategy, but it may not be quite realistic. We want to make sure that the person has like plenty of options to choose from, plenty of tools in the toolkit, like realistic above all is the most important part here. And as I alluded to a little bit earlier, these things can be implemented proactively. So if someone does these things, earlier in the day, earlier in the week, then maybe their well-being is improved, so that when, they have a hard day at work, or things aren't great at home, or they experience some traffic, or there's just like a really inconsiderate person at the cafe talking really loudly on their phone, or on the train, they're not as affected by it. They get stressed, but they don't get as stressed. If they get stressed, they might just get to this 5 out of 10 on the stress scale rather than an 8 out of 10 stressed. So again, proactively, these could be implemented, but also reactively as stress management strategies. So, if we think cue, routine, reward, cue is experience stress, routine is book in a catch up with your friend for, Thursday morning, reward is like, okay, cool, I'm feeling connected. That's helping with the stress a bit. I'm not feeling as alone. And again, the main idea here is that clients are more likely to follow through with it if it's their idea, okay? And because it's internally driven, we look at SDT, it's more on that autonomous end of the motivation spectrum. It's going to be better for their well-being, performance of the task, and then long-term maintenance of the habit as well. So this could be a great strategy in the short term, but also they can keep doing it long-term because it is internally driven. It's their idea, not yours. The last little framework or matrix we're going to look at is essentially helping with decision-making in the moment, okay? And helping clients kind of lean towards the option that has like the lowest effort and the lowest cost associated. So we can call it the cost effort matrix, or the effort consequence matrix, whatever you want to call it. Okay, we want to try and think of options that are very easy to implement, but also don't have consequences. Because if we think about low cost behaviors, cost can be two things. The first one could be like the time and effort that it takes to do the thing or put into the thing. If it requires a lot of effort and a lot of time, it can be very unlikely that the client's going to do that in a very stressful moment, okay? It wants convenience. And the other thing is we want things that are low consequences, okay? Because something could be really low on effort, so it could be really easy to do, but it could have significant consequences, i.e. eating chocolate, drinking alcohol, okay? Low effort, high consequences. But then we could have things that are high effort, like going for a run or going to the gym, right? Even though they have low consequences. So we want to try and think of some options that are really, really easy in these moments to shift them out of this negative space, this really stressful experience and emotional time for them. We essentially want to use this thing as a way to dial down the emotion, to help them feel a little bit better, or at least less worse. And we might take them from an 8 to a 6. And in that point they can start to see things a bit more clearly. They can put themselves in a better position moving forward. So what we do here is we get them to basically, list all the options that they have for managing stress. So the self-determination theory strategies, but also the unhelpful strategies they already have, like the eating chocolate, the drinking alcohol, or even running away from their problems, essentially. So we get them to list rank it, is it high effort or is it low effort? And is it high cost or is it low cost? Okay, so you get a bit of a matrix here, and you want to try and have things that are easy to access, so they're very low effort, but they also have low consequences. And I think one of the most underrated ones to use here is music, all right? I learned this in a book I've been reading called Shift, and so many people can tell you that music helps with their emotions, right? They feel emotions when they listen to music. It puts them in good moods. But very rarely do people proactively use music to shift their mood, right? To improve their mood. So I'm going to bias towards this because I'm quite musical, all right? but it could be something that you could try and suggest to your clients if they, did have a favorite playlist. Firstly, ask permission before giving advice, but it could be a very low cost option and low consequence option, a way to shift their mood. Other things could be like putting on a podcast, listening to like a comedy special, okay, doing some breath work. And, I don't mean to be like a bit of a guru woo-woo, but those things like listening to music, doing some breath work, doing a body scan, that kind of thing, that can help them just feel a bit more grounded, okay? It turns the volume down on the emotion, turns the volume down on the stress, and it puts them in a better position to make better choices moving forward, right? That's the main thing we're trying to think. We're not trying to solve the stress. We're not trying to eradicate the negative emotion. We're trying to turn it down for the clients so they are in a better position moving forward to make better choices. Because it's at this really heightened stress state where two things happen. They make bad choices, but even if they have a good plan, the stress acts as a fog and they can't see the path in the fog. They can't see a better way. So we're trying to turn down the volume of the emotion of the stress so they can see things a lot clearer. The fog is gone. And it's in these moments especially when we need to help our clients find really low cost coping methods. Now, just to wrap up, like, you don't need to be a therapist or a counselor in order to help your clients find better coping strategies. You're not trying to heal their trauma. You're not trying to heal their stress. You're just trying to help them with actions, better actions moving forward, right? Just some better coping strategies. And it is within scope, right? It is just behavior change. You're not asking about their childhood. You're not asking about what their relationship is like with their partner. You're not suggesting they leave or anything. You are essentially helping them find better ways to cope with stress in the moment, especially when at the moment they're leaning towards food and alcohol, which could be a significant thing that is holding them back from achieving their goals. Okay, so if you help solve this problem without telling them to stop doing it and stop being a pussy or to be more disciplined, if you can do this, if you can help them find better ways to cope with stress, okay, and not lean into chocolate and alcohol, not only will you help them make better progress and faster progress, you are going to change their life. Honestly, by helping them find better ways to cope with stress, that is life-changing coaching, right? And you don't have to be a therapist in order to do this. You just have to understand how stress impacts your clients and help them find better ways to cope. And we do this by understanding the habit loop, by using the choice point, okay? Help them understand how what they're currently doing is helping them short term, but how it's holding them back long term. So that when they're in this challenging moment, rather than moving away from their goals, they can move towards their goals. And things that will help them do that is pausing, reconnecting with your goals, why, values, the kind of person that you want to be, especially in these moments, and having a plan in place for replacement strategies for when you are stressed, right? Things to lean into that aren't chocolate and alcohol. That's when we lean into activities that were self-determined by them, okay? That help them feel confident, they feel like they're in control and they have a choice, and they feel connected to others, okay? And especially the things that have the lowest cost associated. So they're really low effort and low consequences. But one thing I will add is that in high levels of stress, it can be quite hard for our clients to follow this path, right? Even if it's self-determined, even if it's low cost, even though if they know that the other thing is going to hold them back towards their goals and it's a horrible choice in the long run, okay, it's hard to see that path. The brain, wants to take the most familiar path, especially when stressed, and it's really hard to see that helpful path because it's so zoomed in and they think this is the only way to cope, right? So be quite kind and compassionate, express that compassion to them and help them be kind to themselves as well. But just reinforce these other coping strategies, these more helpful ones, because the criticism on top of already the shame and frustration and the stress isn't going to help them. It's probably going to make things worse. So just be kind, understand that it's very hard to change behaviors when you are highly stressed. It's not impossible, it's just quite hard to do. So again, be kind and compassionate. That stress acts like a fog and they can't find the path in the fog. So try and look at how we can utilize as best we can these very low cost, low consequence, low effort behaviors to essentially just try and turn down the emotion, right? We're not trying to solve the stress problem. We're not trying to eradicate it, right? We are just trying to turn down the volume of the emotions to put our clients in a better position, right, to make better choices moving forward, or at least make less worse ones that are moving them away from their goals. Now that's stress eating, how to help stress eaters, emotional eaters. And if you have any other challenging situations with clients, any other obstacles that continue to hold them back from achieving their goals, that you sometimes pull your hair out and you're not sure how to help them, especially when they've got a plan to follow and they're not following the plan. Just know that nutrition might be simple, but humans are complex. It's not just as easy as knowing what to do, having a goal that matters, and following through with the actions, right? There's plenty of things that interfere, plenty of things that get in the way. And as coaches, we need to try and understand what is interfering with our clients doing what they know they should be doing in order to achieve their goals, and then having strategies to overcome them. So if you like this, hit the like and subscribe button, but also tell me in the comments what other challenging situations you are facing as a coach and you find your clients in on a regular basis, and I'll make a video on it. Peace.